My guest today is Professor Garance Genicot, who is Professor of Economics at Georgetown University. She studies key issues in development economics, such as aspirations, informal credit and insurance markets, intra-household bargaining, social networks, tolerance, and inequality. Welcome, Garance.
Hi, thank you, Gill.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I want to start with one of your recent papers, Tolerance and Compromise in Social Networks. You say individuals typically differ in their identities, the behaviors that they deem ideal for themselves and for the members of their network, adding their tolerance for behaviors that deviate from their own ideals. This paper studies, you say, the possibility of compromise, departures from one's ideal points in order to be accepted by others. We have some very large social networks now. I think Facebook has 2 billion people on it. And most people have expanded sort of the networks they are part of. But this makes a lot of intuitive sense. You cannot be, sort of very rigid about your ideals to join a network because the network has some variance in behaviors and expectations, right? So what is the data that you're using here, and what are sort of the major conclusions from the paper?
So I'm not using any data. So this is a theoretical paper. So what I wanted to explore is what happened when individuals form their social network and they can change their behavior in order to fit in. So I want to think about social interactions, so that you're going to interact with people. And when you interact with people, and this is what I mean by social interaction, and then we can discuss whether Facebook means interacting with people or not. But when you interact with people, friends, colleagues, and so on, you need to spend time with them. And we, as human beings, vary quite greatly in terms of a bunch of behavior, attitudes, opinion, and so on. And we all have some ideal behavior.
So in some sense, is it the right way to think about this? In some sense, in the behavior space, you have some sort of a sphere around you, right? You're at the center, and you have some leeway, let's call it that allows you to move around that behavior space, but there is a limit beyond which you won't go. So that is sort of the tolerance limit, right?
Exactly. So I might have ideas that are very liberal. I might accept people who are voicing ideas that are more conservative than what I would want to hear or what I would want in my friend. But if it's not too far from where I am, I still value their friendship. That is, it's better to be friends with them, but no. But if I hear opinions that are extremely fascist or extreme right opinion, that's too far from me. My tolerance does not go. I prefer not to interact with them than to interact with them. Because if I interact with them, then hearing those opinions, hearing those just give me so much displeasure that I'm better off not having them in my social network.
So you say in the paper that heterogeneity in tolerance is necessary for compromise.
Yes.
So what's
I can tell you.
What is the intuition behind that? So you need variety in sort of the tolerance limits in the members of the network for it to work. So what's the intuition behind that? It's not fully.
Let me first tell you a little bit about what happened in the paper, and then so what I wanted to do in the paper is to look at a situation in which people think strategically. So that is, I'm going to choose a behavior, and then everybody choose their behavior, and then people decide to build their social network. So you go in a new school, you arrive on campus, and you choose how to behave, how to present yourself, how to dress, how to portray a certain image, a certain image of yourself, and then people create their social network. And I wanted to know, when is it that people are going to compromise? Then when is it who they are going to be friends with? How is it going to facilitate the creation of a social network? Okay. And so what I find, as you said, is that if we are diverse in terms of identity, we all have ideal points that are very different, but we all have the same tolerance level, that is the distance from our ideal point that we would, in which we want to see our friends' behavior land. If we're all similar in that way, there's no way that you can compromise. So you and I might be different. Okay, so you might be a little bit more conservative, and I may be a little bit more liberal, or the opposite. And imagine that if we did not change our behavior, we would not be acceptable to each other. That is, like, your view would be a bit too conservative for me, my view would be a bit too liberal for you, and we prefer not to be friends. Okay, but if we just made a little effort, okay, that is, we came a little bit more in the middle, and the way we would talk, the way we would present ourselves, our behavior, our code of conduct would be more similar, like in the middle, maybe we would greatly enjoy being friends. Okay, I did not change, okay, but you're not voicing the opinions that maybe I dislike the most, and I'm not voicing the opinion that you dislike the most, and then we can greatly enjoy the friendship and play tennis together, do whatever we do that bring us joy, and that is the reason behind our friendship.
Yeah, but this will be true if all the members in the network are the same or similar, and they don't have overlapping tolerance limits, right? What I'm trying to get to is, why is the variance in tolerance is a necessary condition for compromise? For instance, I could envision overlapping tolerance limits, even though there is no variance in it. You know, everybody is sort of the same, but they have slightly different identities.
Same, yes, but then we don't need to compromise. So if it's possible that you're tolerant enough that you like me the way I am, like, that is, you prefer to be friends with me even if I don't change the way I am. And I like you the way, the symmetry in tolerance level implies that if you like me the way I am, you might prefer me in a different way, but you like me the way I am, then I like you the way you are. And so you see, we don't need to change or compromise in who we are in order to be friends. Maybe we would both be more happy if we still compromise, but we still can be friends.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So the intolerant individuals, you call them bridges, right? They sort of, another little bit counterintuitive again. You say relatively intolerant individuals who can serve as bridges are critical for the reciprocated compromise of more tolerant individuals. So they sort of they sort of provide a target in some sense. So, you know, you can move toward a target. The target is not moving because they're intolerant, and perhaps that's providing some flexibility in the system. Is that the way to think about it?
Yes, the fact is that if someone is really intolerant, then I know that in order to be friends with them, I have to, you know, compromise and do as they wish in order to be friends with them. So if we all know that, and those people are particularly valuable in society, or we value their friendship or their business relationship and so on, they are going to force us to, if we want to be friends with them, if we want to connect, to compromise in order to be friends with them. Also, if I want to be friends with you, but you compromise in order to be friends with them, then that gives me more incentive. It's not just them, it's with everybody else who tend to have behavior, who will concentrate towards the ideal behavior of those more intolerant people. So after World War II in Europe, there was a little bit of a rise of maybe intolerance in the middle for both extreme, both communist and fascism felt like dangerous ideas, and you might have what we may call intolerant moderates, people who had relatively moderate opinion, but really did not tolerate any opinion that would be too much on the left or too much on the right. And that might actually be what I show in the paper, is that that would tend to bring people towards the middle. And so that might help creating a lot of social capital, a lot of social connection by bringing everybody together towards a middle.
Yeah, so the 2 points you make here also, when individuals with extreme identities are symmetrically less tolerant, societies become more polarized. So that is very intuitive. In contrast, intolerance among moderates encourages cohesion. So that is sort of the spring effect in some sense that you talked about.
Exactly. And this is, you know, by bringing everybody, you start by, you know, the fact is compromise builds on compromise, because you might have people who think about in the middle of a line representing political opinion, think about some people being quite intolerant and valuable to people not too far from them. Those people may want to compromise to be friends with those ones. No, those people, I may want to be friends with them because I value all those business connections, I value the friendship, I value, and so we may all like start, the more people become friends in that, you know, in the middle, the more maybe I want to change I may have very extreme opinion, but maybe I want to compromise and actually not voice those opinions, not present myself this way, but just behave in a way that is much more like the moderate in order to be with them.
Yeah, let's go on to another topic that you've written more about. That's aspirations and inequality. So you have a review paper here. You said reviews the literature on aspirations in economics with a particular focus on socially determined aspirations. The core theory builds on two fundamental principles. Aspirations can serve to inspire, but still higher aspirations can lead to frustration and resentment. And B, aspirations are largely determined by the individual's social environment. So this has a lot of implications, especially for developing countries, right? I would think, you know, I grew up in South India. I remember reading an economist article in the 80s, 90s. It's a small state called Kerala, and it shows very high levels of suicide rates. At one point, perhaps higher than Japan. And the hypothesis economist article was pushing forward was that perhaps aspirations of people living there is a bit too high, and there's a mismatch between their aspirations, what they have or could accomplish, and that might be one of the reasons. So this is sort of in that direction, isn't it?
Yes, actually, you know, some of the inspiration for this paper came from India, came from, you know, in Calcutta, where my in-laws family come from. In Calcutta, you would have a large shanty town close to a big bridge, and for a while, there was nothing above this bridge. Then you started seeing like advertisement for gated communities with air conditioning and fridge and the type of housing that, you know, seem like really attractive even in the US, and this would be advertised right next to the shantytown. And you know, it's the same time as the Indian economy was booming. A lot of people were getting much richer, but it's also felt like that wealth or that increase in income for some group of the population was very much in the face of people who could not necessarily achieve that. And it seems to me that it's not clear to me that that would inspire people, make them want to work harder, make them feel motivated and invest more, or would actually frustrate them and discourage them. So there's a really nice, you know, almost parable that it is known as Hirschman's tunnel that my co-author Deborah Jouet likes to talk about. And Hirschman is describing a big traffic jam. Like any city in India knows, where you have so many lanes, no traffic is moving, you're stuck in the traffic jam for a while. Then all of a sudden, in the next lane, you start seeing the cars moving. How does that make you feel? Okay? So maybe in the beginning you feel hopeful, like, you know, there's some information that is coming that maybe something is going to move. So that feels like good news. And then if it keeps on moving in the other lane and you're stuck in your lane, that's going to make you feel furious. Okay? So what we wanted to think about is the double edge of aspiration and linking it to inequality. So it can be that, you know, when you start in a situation where everybody is poor, there's very little wealth, or the wealth that you see is extreme and hidden and it's not in your face, you know, everybody is the same, maybe your aspirations are low, okay? But as things are changing and some people are getting richer and inequality is increasing, in the beginning, maybe it motivates you. Like there's some, you know, things that you want to mimic this, you want to get a little richer, and maybe you want to invest more, and it motivates you. But if inequality gets too big, then maybe your aspirations are getting out of control. You're looking at example of wealth that is incredible, it's in your face, and it's unachievable for you. How does that make you feel? Like, does it motivate you to invest more? Or in fact, does it stop motivating you and it totally frustrates you? Okay, so these are the things that we wanted to capture. Yeah. And we were inspired by the fact that, you know, we have never seen growth rates in the history of mankind. We have never seen growth rate as high as what we are seeing in, not in the recent years, but pre-COVID that we see in many economies, like the time for income per capita to double in China is like 8 or 9 years, as opposed to a time for income per capita to double during the Industrial Revolution in England was 150 years. So, you know, incomes are rising very fast, and they're rising in a very unequal fashion. Some sectors are going up, some people are getting richer, and in addition, because of social network, because of media, because it's in our face, no? You see incredible wealth in your face all the time. And the question is, do we think that it, you know, motivates you, or do you think that it depresses you or frustrates you? And so we wanted to build a model that would have both possibility, that aspirations can motivate you or can frustrate you. And we are linking it to inequality.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So if I understand this correctly, aspirations, not too cold, not too hot. There is sort of a just right level of aspirations that pushes you forward.
Yeah.
And individuals' aspirations are intimately connected with the social environment. So whatever is happening at the individual level is going to be governed by the social environment. But it's also a sequential game, isn't it? Aspirations of parents, children, grandchildren, they all have some sequential effect on the family as well, right? So this then gets into sort of a cultural question. So do we see, cultural differences in aspirations, and obviously all of this is dependent on initial conditions as well. So where you start off makes a big difference where you're going to end up in.
Yes. So what we wanted to capture is, crucially, we wanted to capture the social aspect of aspirations. That is, you are not choosing or not entirely choosing your aspirations, okay? Because in our model and in real life, what makes you the most happy might be to have very low aspirations, okay? Because what we want to think of aspiration is like a goal, a milestone that you like to achieve. And you're going to get benefit from going beyond this level of aspiration. So if I think about push-ups, I might have a goal of making 20 push-ups, okay? And so if I fail at my goal, it's not going to give me any pleasure to have done 5 or to have done 8 push-ups, like I still failed. But once I get close to my goal, then I get really, very motivated because I'm going to get the benefit of surpassing my goal. And then I get additional benefits from going beyond those 20 push-ups, 21, 22, that feels great. Then, going from 20 to 21 feels really great. Going from 50 to 51, the additional benefit I'm going to get from this is going to be less because I've surpassed my goal. So those benefits are diminishing. So I'm going to get benefit from surpassing my aspirations. No? So if I could choose my aspirations, I would like to have really low goal for myself. I would be happy if I publish 1 paper in 20 years. That would be, if I could live with those aspirations, I would be a very happy person. But where those aspirations come from, I'm not the one just choosing them. And that's the way we come back to life being in this place, that my aspirations come from looking around me. I cannot help it. I look at colleagues who publish a lot every month, and then I compare myself. So these things, like what I see around me, drive my aspirations, okay? And then the question is, of course, that does not make me necessarily happy. Having higher aspiration does not make for happiness. But the question is, sometimes it might motivate me to work hard, and then my future self is going to be happy because I will have achieved more. Or parents who have higher aspiration might save more, invest more in their children, and that's going to be good for the kid, for what they're going to leave to the kids. Or sometimes those aspirations will be too high, and that's going to frustrate me, just make me miserable, and I'm not going to achieve them anyway. And so it gives me no incentive to work hard, because what am I going to do? I'm going to fail at those aspirations. So this is the type of idea that we wanted to capture. And if I go back to what you were saying, different culture, different, level of income, where you start from, that affects you, because where you are in society, or your ethnic group, or your geographical location, all these matter for what you see, no? If your aspirations are determined by who is around you, that's going to naturally, like where you are in life, physically, geographically, in which group and society you are, is going to affect your level of aspiration. So you can have different level of aspiration for different ethnic group within a country. You can have that if you are from a very rich family who goes to the club and goes to and has a certain social life, is going, that person is going to have higher aspiration for their children than someone who is in a shanty town to start with. And so the aspirations are going to be determined by a mix of your own characteristic, your own income level, your own ethnic group, and so on, and the distribution of income in the society. And your own characteristic will filter what you see of that distribution that then affect your aspirations.
Yeah, so I think in some sense it's changing, right? So we have some examples of societies like Finland, for example, where society's characteristics are more uniform and the individual's goals are fairly uniform. And Finland always comes on top in terms of happiness among countries. And it's sort of the same application here, right? So what you're saying, if I understand this correctly, is that your aspirations is a function of where you are. You say that it's a combination of individuals' characteristics and, let's say, income level and the distribution of income around you. So that is a social environment. Would you say, as we look forward, the individual's characteristic is going to be less important? The reason I'm asking is we have policy questions now, such as minimum basic income as a tool. People are losing jobs due to artificial intelligence and so on. So the minimum basic income is sort of making the field even, right, in some sense. So do you see that as a policy choice, it could actually have a beneficial effect on happiness, on society?
So the minimum basic income would reduce inequality maybe at the bottom. I don't know if that's going to be enough given the incredible rate of growth of very high income of the top 1%, even worse, the top 0.1% income and wealth is growing at an incredible rate. I'm not sure how much of a dent it's going to do in terms of reducing the inequality. But what we are saying is that at a moment where, so you could think about starting with two hypothetical initial distribution of income and start with a world where you have, you know, a little bit of inequality, but not too high. Okay, like maybe your example of Finland to start with. And what's going to happen is you have some inequality. It means that your aspirations are not going to be my aspiration and so on. But there's going to be a tendency, if my aspirations are a bit high, but not too high, it's going to motivate me. So if I'm a little bit below in the distribution, seeing other people that are above me in the distribution is going to motivate me. And I will want this for my kids. I will want that for my future self. I'm going to invest, save, try to increase future income at the cost of today's consumption. But so it means that my income is going to see, or my children's income is going to be higher than my own income. I'm going to see quite a bit of growth because those aspirations are going to motivate me to invest in future opportunities, okay? While people who are at the top of those distribution might be less motivated because they're already at the top of the distribution. And so compared to where they are, their aspirations are not that high. And so they're a bit less motivated to try to catch up. And so in this case, aspirations are going to motivate people to, like, that are below, to catch up with people who are higher up, and you're going to tend to see a convergence in income. Other forces and shocks means that, you know, you can be hit with shocks and not everybody will end up with the same income, but there's a source of pressure towards equalization. Now, start with another society, like the United States, where there's a lot of inequality, okay? And in that case, what you might have is a bunch of people who are in the distribution who are so low in terms of income compared to the rest, but see quite a bit what happens at the top. They see TV shows that are always about wealthy people and so on, and their aspirations are so high that it frustrates them. Like that, you know, there's no way they can achieve them. It's too high, it's too hard. It would require too much of a sacrifice to reach my aspiration. And so that, you know, I give up. It does not motivate me. While you have a bunch of people who might be in the upper part of the income distribution where the previous logic applies. You know, they're upper middle class, they see the very rich, and they want some part of it, but it motivates them, and they're going to want to invest a lot to try to mimic the rich, and they're going to be more hungry for future benefits, and that's going to motivate them. So these two groups of people are going to be like diverging. You're going to have ever increasing inequality. You're going to have the top where people are comparing themselves to each other. They're like, oh, my neighbor has this much, and so I want my kid to have a yacht too, and then they have an helicopter, and I want a helicopter too, and I want to mimic them, and it makes me want to invest a lot in my children, maybe potentially have fewer children to be able to invest a lot in catching up. And then while at the bottom, you're going to have people who are giving up and are not motivated, not investing a lot. And between those two groups have ever increasing inequalities. So if you start with an initial situation where things are not too different, you might have pressure for equalization in the distribution. But if you start with groups that are quite different to start with, they're going to be ever expanding inequality like we tend to see. So would a minimum income be enough to stop that? I don't know. Like, you know, maybe you need a lot of taxation at the top too, and to compress a lot the distribution before being able to get at a situation where you get that aspirations are forced for equalization.
So the initial conditions matter for equilibrium. So as you say, Finland's equilibrium is, you know, it's sort of self-equilibrating to, you know, to more equality, whereas the US's initial conditions are so varied that it's going to continue to diverge, and inequalities continue to rise. And that's what we see in the data too, right? So I want to go into another set of papers that you have, which I found really, really interesting. One of them is Electoral Systems and Inequalities in Government Interventions. So this paper studies the political determinants of inequalities in government interventions under majoritarian and proportional representation systems. So majoritarian is the winner takes all type system, right? So it is sort of like a senatorial elections, perhaps. Proportional representation is more like the Congress. Is that the way to think about it?
So if you think about proportional representation, you think about the equivalent in the US would be the national popular vote. So this is saying that what is often discussed is thinking about every vote contributes, and then you tally the vote to see who wins the election. So think about proportional representation system as the national popular vote. While when you think about majoritarian system, you have electoral districts, states in the United States, and you think about within those states, you have you win the state, you win the electoral district if you have the majority of the vote in that district. So it's a winner take all within each electoral system. So this is what happened in the United States. This is also what happens in India for the parliament. You have winner-take-all within electoral district. And so what we wanted to know is what does the electoral system means in terms of incentive to provide local public goods. So if you think about leaders provide public goods, but often those public goods are like what? Schools, roads, hospitals, and those goods are located in one place. No, you don't put them anywhere. You put them in specific place. So this is what we call local public good, in the sense that they benefit people who live there, but they don't benefit people who don't live there. And they're the source of quite a bit of inequality. Okay, we have, you know, huge differences across village in India in terms of public goods that have been provided, and they can create quite a bit of difference across region. And we wanted to know what was the incentive of politicians when they're campaigning, trying to get vote. What are the incentive and how do they differ across those two systems? So there's, you know, a lot of literature has emphasized that a majoritarian system might be more unequal. Okay, might be more unequal. Why? For a very good reason. For instance, a big mechanism is you only need to win 50% of the vote in 50% of the district in order to win the election. And so that might give you a lot of reason to give up and not provide local public good to a bunch of regions. While in a proportional representation, a priori, getting your vote from wherever is going to contribute to winning the election. And so you might want to spread it equally. That logic is really, really powerful and is a very, very important result to keep in mind. But there's something else happening. When you have, when you say that in a proportional representation system, you can get the votes from wherever, it means that if your voters are not the same, if they differ, maybe you have reason to go and get all your votes from some specific location. And so it's not clear to us, it was not clear to us that the literature had paid attention to the fact that in a majoritarian system, yes, you only need to win 50% of the district. Okay, but another way to view that is to say you need to win at least 50% of the district. That in a proportional representation system, you might actually want to get most of your votes from some specific location. So what we do is to think about locations, think about villages, think about municipalities, think about county in the US, and to whom you're going to give like local public good to try to get the election. And there's some characteristic of those locations, those county or those villages, or that are going to make them very responsive to your promises to give local public good. So it can be responsive in terms of electoral gain. It's their population size, that's good, but also their turnout rate. Having many people, if they don't show up, does not help you very much for the election. It's their, what's called in the literature, swingness, that is like how responsive they are to electoral promises. It can be their level of information. And we call all those characteristics of a locality, we call them sensitivity. Okay? And in a proportional representation system, it's quite simple. You have those local public goods, you want to allocate them to win votes, you're going to give more in places that are very sensitive and less in places that are not very sensitive. Okay? So this is the way you get the more bang for your buck. That is, you get the most electoral votes for the budget that you have to allocate for local public good. Okay. Now, in a majoritarian system, it's a little bit different. What turns out to matter is not just the sensitivity of a location or a village or a county, but it's its relative sensitivity. That is, its sensitivity compared to the other locality that compose that electoral district. Okay? So it's not just whether your county has a high turnout or a low turnout, but how does it compare to the other county in your district? So if I take let me take two counties, but located in two different states in the US, okay? And think about they have the same population, and they have the same turnout and information and so on. All their sensitivity is the same. But the county that is on the left is surrounded by other counties that are not very informed, not very, don't turn out much, are not very sensitive to electoral promises and so on. While the county on the right is surrounded by other counties that are very informed, very sensitive, they turn out a lot and so on. In a majoritarian system, the county on the left that is relatively sensitive is going to be very attractive to me. The county on the right that is relatively insensitive compared to the other in its electoral district is not going to be very attractive. And so this is going to, what's going to matter is the relative sensitivity of the county that is going to characterize whether I want to give a lot or not. In addition, there's also the pivotability of the, of the entire district that is going to be very important. But so it's a little different, and this might be saying if you live in places that are quite homogeneous, that is your electoral district have counties that are quite similar, then whether one is very sensitive, as long as it's surrounded in its electoral district by other counties that are very sensitive, and the other one is not very sensitive, but surrounded by other places that are not very sensitive, they're going to be similar to me. And so that's going to make me want to treat them in a similar fashion. While in a proportional representation system, I may want to go and target like the very sensitive one and leave out the very insensitive one.
So it's an optimization problem that I was thinking that in the greatest and largest democracies of the world, it's all about buying votes, right? How do you buy just enough votes to get elected? It's not really about policies. It's not really about anything, really. It is a vote, but how do I best deploy my limited resources to buy just enough votes to get elected? That is the problem, right?
Yes, and then the question is, when does it get cheaper to do it by using public policy, like public good, as opposed to actually vote buying by giving cash to people, as it's still very frequent in some society, already become a source of progress. But it's clear that there's a lot of discretion in the way politicians are using public resources in order to get elected. And, we try, as society, try to put formulas, try to reduce the amount of discretion that politicians might have in order to favor some location versus the other. But you need to leave some discretion, because sometimes it's for good reason that you need to give more to one place than the other. But whenever you leave discretion, there's also incentive to use it, for the politician to use it in his favor.
You have another paper along the same lines. It's also quite interesting. So political reservations as term limits. And I think you're looking at India here again. You say, while political reservations aim to ensure a more equal representation for women and disadvantaged groups, they also impose effective term limits on many incumbent politicians who would otherwise have had a chance to contest elections again. So by decreasing the future electoral prospects of politicians, next period reservations may affect politicians' present resource allocations and worsen elite capture. So this is a problem, actually, I would imagine, in most democracies. So they have a lot of talk about term limits in the US, as you know. Term limits generally has a beneficial effect, generally speaking. But what you're highlighting here is that term limits could could have different behavioral outcomes from the politicians, right? How they allocate resources, where they deploy them, and how do they treat people in their constituencies and so on, right? So before we get into that, how does political reservations act as a sort of a term limit mechanism? What happens there?
So what happens there is when you want to put gender quota or quotas for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, like in India, that are minorities, and you want to put quotas, you have different ways to do it. Either you're trying to, as many countries have done, you're trying to say we need that many women running for election, but then you're not guaranteed that you're going to have any women elected, or we need that many minorities running for election, but then again, you're not too sure that you're going to end up with the same percentage that what you're trying to impose in power. So what many countries have done is to do reservations. That is, declare that some seats are going to be at times devoted to a minority or devoted to a woman. Okay? This is a way to guarantee a certain representation of a minority of a woman.
There are two things there, right? So one is, so if seats are randomly allocated to women and minorities, then that clearly creates a term limit issue for incumbents, because the seat may not be there for them if they're randomly allocated. So that makes a lot of sense. But the second point in the paper is that if you have a term limit, how does your behavior change? What type of resource allocation decisions do you make, right, if you have a term limit? And it's quite interesting, so I think if I understand this correctly, what you're saying is that if I have a term limit, I'm going to sort of focus my resources to some groups who are already doing well, because I'm going to get out of power in the future, so I can go back to these guys and get benefits from them, as opposed to allocating resources across a wide cross section of population, right?
A weakness of the paper is that we cannot actually see what happens. So we don't know exactly what you get out from favoring the elite or not. What we started is the premise that there's quite a large literature documenting quite a lot of elite capture, that land ownership is a clear defining characteristic of elite in rural India. And so what we are seeing is that this is an empirical paper. So what we are seeing is that empirically, when you're term limited, because you don't have to run again, you tend to give them more. Then when you're not term limited, and you tend to then give more BPL cards that are supposed to go to poor household, less to landed elite, and so on. That matches one of the benefits of having election, okay? That, you were talking about vote buying or getting vote as a bad thing, but it all depends on what your incentive. Getting the votes may means that you want to give some benefits to poor household. If you have local public goods that benefit, like street blocks, then there might be more household where you have a poor, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe household might live in a highly populated block, and maybe your incentive to get a lot of votes make you do the right thing. That is, give it to the people who would benefit the most, because those are the ones that would be the most grateful to you, because if it's local public goods, you can, make many people happy. And so the election here, the incentive to get the votes might make you want to do what economists call the social planner wants you to do. That is to benefit, largely the population. But when you don't have, what we are seeing is you give more to the elite. We are not seeing exactly what you get out of it. Is it something about a quid pro quo? Is it a reversion of, ingrained hierarchy where you tend to benefit some people? Is it clearly I scratch your back and you scratch mine? Or is it just, the natural tendency from internalizing power hierarchy? We are not seeing that. We don't know.
Yeah, I mean, at the highest level, it's disheartening to really conclude that politics and representative democracies are really businesses. It has nothing to do with making the right policy. It has nothing to do with developing the country. It's all about business.
So as long as we are not saying that it has nothing to do. We are saying you could have that you care about catering to the elite, you could care about the social good, and you could care about your re-election probability, okay? And what we're saying is that if we lower and we remove that benefit from, re-election probability, you're going to do more towards the elite. So you could have a worldview where our paper is compatible with people caring to some extent about doing the right thing, but just that they care about doing the right thing, but they also care about the elite, and they also care about getting re-elected. And when you remove, because in this case, getting re-elected and doing the right thing might, go together. That is, giving BPL card to people who need it the most, giving local public good in more populated streets are the way to get votes, but is also what you kind of want to do. Reducing your electoral concern is going to make you do more of maybe what we don't want you to do, is to benefit the elite. Okay. Now, so what we are a bit agnostic in terms of whether politicians are do not care at all about the social good, or they care to some extent, but it's not their only concern. Now, I leave you to your view of, optimism or not. If we look at the climate, clearly they don't seem to care so much about doing any of the right things. So maybe the cynic view is more appropriate, but,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really studied democracies in Europe. I don't know what really happens there, but between India and the US, the dominant factor in a politician's objective function is getting elected. It's very clear. And given that dominant objective, yeah, they might do some good things, maybe there is sort of overlap with objective. But they make a lot of noise around the good thing. But the dominant objective appears to be getting elected again.
Yes, unfortunately, it seems that there's a lot of short-term incentive, yes. And so, yes.
I sometimes wonder.
Yes.
No, I sometimes wonder, representative democracies, this is not in the paper, but I want to get your perspective. Is that system really working anymore? are there alternatives to representative democracies? For example, direct democracy would be a way to think about it. So we have technology now. Can we put policies in front of the people and let the people select policies?
Puts them. So again, it depends also. So there's a large literature that is showing that who sets the agenda has a lot of power. So look at the cases where referendum have been used in Europe, that is then a direct vote, is telling for a specific issue, what do the people think? The way these referendum have been used, the time they're called, often they end up being like a veto policy or vote of confidence against the leader. They tend to be called at strategic time. And so you cannot avoid some amount of manipulation. And so who would decide what to, when do you ask to people, how do you phrase the question, and so on. And then can you again, money is clearly is nowhere in our ideal models of democracy, no? And so the amount of money that is going in the back of election campaign contribution and so on, now would you have the same amount of money that is going to be lobbying on whatever issue that gets put to the public to convince them one way or the other? Look at the discussion on vaccine. There's a lot of money that is going around and campaigning and so on to convince people one way or the other in terms of vaccine that has very little to do with the scientific evidence that we have. So that makes me worry too. And I'm not sure what would happen in a way where we get rid of representative. I don't know. It strikes me that tight regulation, campaigning, tight regulation in lobbying might be more important. But
yeah, and then there is a size issue, right? So what we see in New Zealand is quite different from what we see in India and the United States. And so, how does a small system behave? Seems like, New Zealand is doing really well with representative democracy, but it is really the large systems that appear to have big problems. Part of it is leadership. If you don't have good leaders, you are in deep trouble anyway.
Yes, I think that there's the system. There's also something that might have to do with culture and morality and things where, as an economist, I think I have very little to say. But, we all have opportunities in our daily life to do the right things or to serve our private interest. And it seems to me that yes, when the incentives are big, then as an economist, I know that, most likely we are going to act in our own interest, but there's still something else. No, when the stakes are not too big, we're able to do the right things. No, because there's a little bit of morality, sometimes religion, sometimes something in us that is like, making us do the right thing, even when our incentives are not. And maybe, I think we have a recent book that I just saw that is talking about a generation of sociopaths who wound America. The question is like, is there something else than our incentive? Our incentives are there, they're just getting bigger, there's more money in the system, the size, the heterogeneity, a lot of things that makes it difficult. But do we need something else, like morality, religion, honesty, or something that would be ingrained? But it seems to me that we are venerating money and we are venerating fame and power for the sake of it, and maybe that plays a role too, no?
Yeah, let's be optimistic as we look forward. This has been great, Garance. Thanks so much for spending time with me.
Thank you, Gill.
Thank you. Bye.